You find something important to you that's differentiating, that's resonating, brand it.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back. Unfortunately, this is the final episode 8 of the Brand Builders Playbook. This is Jim Stengel.
And I'm Ryan Barker.
Hey, Ryan, this is kind of bittersweet. It's the last time we're getting together. We've been planning this series for quite a while. I just wonder, shall we do season 2?
I think absolutely, but it is bittersweet. We've learned so much over these last 8 episodes, Jim's, on all the facets of the modern playbook on how to build an enduring, profitable, and purposeful brand. So it's a little sad.
What did you enjoy most about it, Ryan?
I think it's the diversity of point of views from all the different characters and titans of the trade that we brought into play. A lot of old principles that have been refreshed, current principles to navigate the waters today, especially with AI and all the turmoil. And I think the practical war stories and advice for whether you're a new brand builder or a seasoned brand builder that needs to revitalize to navigate these waters. How about you?
Well, I really enjoyed working with you. For one, I enjoyed all the planning with your team. It's just fantastic. They're terrific. And I enjoyed Lindsay and Kate and working with them. And unfortunately, we don't have them for the last episode. But I just liked their perspectives, their freshness. They bring different points of view than you and me. And I just think it added a tremendous amount to the series. So what did I knew both of them before we started, and I'm not sure you did. What did you learn from those two amazing women, Ryan?
Well, you have Kate that comes from an academic background, grounded in research. She's not just preaching concepts, but teaching future brand builders. I think there's a lot of rigor that comes into debunking myths to hear that point of view. And Lindsay, on the other hand, comes from a very qualitative, getting in deep, almost a forensic point of view of navigating cultures and audiences. And I agree, Jim. It's the diverse backgrounds that really help us understand a sort of a 360-degree point of view on how to build a modern playbook for brand building.
Well, I don't want to say we saved the best for last, but maybe we did for episode 8. We have a real treat this week. We have not one, but 2 guests, 2 experts who are joining us. They are both prominent academics in their fields. They come from different generations, from different backgrounds. They're just remarkable people, Marcus Collins and David Aaker. I mean, to have 2 people to wrap up a series on the Brand Builders Playbook. I mean, David Aaker's written books about that, which we will talk about. But I think this is going to be so much fun. But we have to return to our tradition that we've done for all 8 episodes, and that is to talk about a brand building playbook that you and I are admiring and that's somehow related to our topic this week. And I want to turn it over to you, Ryan, for kicking this off, and then I'll bring the playbook that I am especially thinking about this week.
Jim, I'm going to go with this week, Microsoft with Satya Nadella. Even though he started 11 years ago, I think the transformation continues to be the gift that keeps on giving, especially from a stock piece. How did they go from a 300 billion market cap to now over 3 trillion, almost 4 trillion? Well, this was a culture that was very much a know-it-all, right? Very intelligent, corporate, and he transformed it to this learn-it-all culture, which was really grounded on empathy and empowering both Microsoft employees that we got to learn. We got to get back into the ground roots and learn, and that led to many of these transformations. They retired some of these brands. It wasn't this notion of it's a monopoly and we got to keep it, and really invested in the future. And the stock is continuing to be a thing of beauty.
Well, it's a great example. By the way, I didn't know you were going to go here. It's a great example of leadership and brand-led leadership, which is, our topic for the week, one of our topics. And ironically, I picked Apple. And, Apple, Microsoft is one of the most famous campaigns in history. But the reason I picked Apple is, this is the concluding episode. It's about leadership. It's about brand-led leadership. We have Marcus and David joining. I mean, I think Steve Jobs is probably the best example in history of brand-led leadership. And his company now also has a very high valuation. And this is kind of especially meaningful for me this year because I was in the Cannes Festival earlier this past summer, and I run a class there. And Apple was named the Creative Marketer of the Year 2025 at Cannes Lions. And Tor, who is their head of marketing, Tor Marland, came into my class, and we had a chat in front of 60 people about what brand-led leadership looks and feels like. And I think, they've been used endlessly as an example, but I think there's a reason for that. And to have Tor speaking about the importance of simplicity in brand building, distinctivity, patience in rolling out products and new sub brands. If you talk about Apple, the power of product experience and superiority in product, the power of humanity in a time of AI. He talked about AI running shotgun to the humans. He talked about the importance of debate, and it's all about the work. It's not about, and trust. They have had the same creative agency, Media Arts Lab, for 28 years. So the lessons just keep going. And so I think that's the playbook I'm thinking about a lot, because I'm still pondering that interview. And I met him later in the week for a drink, and we continued to reflect on it. So it was a real gift to be. I knew Tor from years back when he was at Gray. It's a real gift to have a little reunion with him, and to get him, by the way, down to earth, lovely, honest, relatable person. Probably one of the, if not the best marketing job in the world. And you would never know it when you're having a conversation with him. I think it says everything about the company and about him.
Gotta love it.
We're about to go into the episode 8. We've talked about that. I'd like you, if you could, to sort of take us through the garden of the first 7 episodes. Walk us through the garden and give us a little, as Netflix does, a little recap before we go into the final episode. So take us through it, Ryan, so it's all fresh in our minds as we jump into our last session.
All right, Jim. There's a lot here. So on episode 1, we had Why Brand Matters. We had our guest, Chris Burgrave. And I think the key insight there was that brand is a growth engine. It's an asset, not an expense, not just a logo with a cute tagline. Episode 2, we had the emotional connection with our guest, Sophia Colucci, and really talked in detail about the importance of how emotion drives sustainable loyalty and revenue even today. Episode 3, we had pricing power and perception with Sandeep Seth, and really talked a lot about trusted brands and the importance of trusted brands to command a premium price. We talked about how in Bara, that brand love, that emotional connection reduces price sensitivity, and Sandeep had war stories on that. Episode 4, we delved into proving brand ROI, and we had Rajamanar and the CMO CFO linkage. Even today, there's a lot of tension between those, and the ability to bridge the gap between marketing and finance. Marketers need to come in prepared. You need to come in with facts and hard data to have those meaningful conversations. Episode 5, we delved into brand versus performance marketing with Andrea Brimmer. And she really talked a lot about how equity and efficiency, they're not mutually exclusive. And as you know, well published with HBR and the Work Report on brand versus performance marketing, we really talked about the hard data on how to debunk the myth that these are siloed lines of businesses when they're really two sides of the same coin. We had a fun one in episode 6 on brand partnerships with Kristen Darcy, and really talked about the process of how do you align your values and collaborations to build trust when identifying strategic brands that could both address your perceptual weakness while reinforcing your strengths. And last but not least, in episode 7, we had media mix optimization with our friend Damon Berger. And put it simply, smarter spend equals stronger brand. With all the turmoil today, there are so many areas of optimization for short and long-term brand equity. I think one of the key things there is that marketers kind of do a disservice in talking about how brand's all about tomorrow, brand's all about long-term. No, it's a short and long-term contribution when you're measuring properly and optimizing. So it was a lot, but I'm very excited for today, Jim.
Well, Ryan, with your hat of leader of Bara, I hate to put this question to you, but what's your favorite episode of those 7?
Probably because of the optimization piece. It's frustrating to see that when you're in turmoil, finance folks typically think brand is the first place to take funds away. And so, or an activist investor is knocking on your door. I think Your ability to understand how to prove that brand is an asset, how to quantify it, how to optimize it, whether it's through audiences, whether it's through spend by channel, whether through its positioning in the partnerships. I think that was probably one of the key ones. And while that's not a new concept, I think the tools, the data, and AI have allowed us to make it easier to have those debates. How about you, Jim?
Yeah, man, I love them all. The one that maybe surprised me most was the one with Kristen Darcy of True Religion and how energetic that was. And obviously we're in a world where the creator economy is taking over. What, $280 billion spent on with creators in the brand world. It was a major theme at Cannes earlier last summer. So I just think they have I mean, the brand is hot. It was a brand that was not hot, and they made it hot again. And they did it a lot through their whole spirit of who to collaborate, how to collaborate with, and I think they were a great role model for how brands need to think about their go-to-market strategy differently with a very open mindset about who they should work with. So that was a really fun, great, energetic, and episode full of learning.
Yes, it was.
Now, listen, thanks for the review. And here we go into episode 8. We're going to have these brand legends, thought leadership legends, Aaker and Collins, with us. And I think what I love our audience to keep their antenna up for this episode is we hear a lot about AI disruption, cultural fragmentation, constant reinvention. These two talk about brand and leadership may be the most important differentiator of all. And I think just listen to what these two very wise people talk about when they talk about brand and how to think about it in this very, very, very dynamic world we're into right now. Ryan, before we invite those two guys in, you talked about Microsoft a little bit earlier in terms of the playbook that you're admiring. I know you and the Barra team have looked at a lot of data relative to Microsoft and the principles that are driving it. You spoke very briefly about it a few minutes ago. Can you go there a little bit more deeply before we jump into this discussion with Marcus and David?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been measuring data, as you know, Jim, for in real time for over 11 and a half years. And so if I take that pre-point versus today, when looking at Microsoft, one of the things that we can measure is the core competency or the essence of a brand. We know what's in their DNA, and then we can tell you what portion of their DNA is actually a driver of both behavior and long-term equity. So as I mentioned, Microsoft 11 years ago versus today, the DNA composition being this big corporate brand, and corporate doesn't always mean good things, right? Being corporate has sort of softened in the DNA. Innovation has come into the play, and empathy has begun to creep into its core competency. So one thing is when you can see it not just from a Wall Street perspective, but consumers are giving those associations, and you're seeing that transformation over the course of a decade.
You wouldn't have associated empathy with Microsoft
No,
15 years ago.
absolutely not.
Yeah, they were an amazing company back then for lots of reasons, but empathy wasn't part of it. And look, as you talked about a few minutes ago, how their market value has absolutely amplified, expanded with doubling down on some things that were gaps and that are really important to people.
Absolutely. I think it's also worth mentioning when you look at perceptions of data in real time, we measure not just consumers, but B2B audiences like institutional investors. Seeing two different lenses come together on common perceptions, that's really a testament of transformation.
Okay, Ron, enough of us two. Let's bring in our guests.
Let's do it.
Well, I am more excited than I can even describe to welcome these two guests on our final episode of the Brand Builders Playbook. So welcome, Marcus, and welcome, David, to the show. You both don't need an introduction. In our banter before we started recording, I realized you hadn't met each other in person. I think you guys need to do that. But I want to start with a question I use on my weekly show to kind of introduce my audience to guests. And the question is, what's the first brand in your life that you remember making an impact on you? And David, I think we have to start with you. The young boy growing up, wherever you grew up, what was that brand that sort of stood out and was defining for you?
I don't know. I think it was the head tennis racket. I was playing tennis, and that really changed things. Then the Prince tennis racket after that. I think that you first of all you had to have a signature wood racket, but then came head and then came Prince.
So do you still play with a head or a Prince racket?
No, I had a bike accident, so I'm not playing much anymore, but it's evolved. And now the rackets today are really technologically amazing. And that's why they can play like they can. It's certainly not because of they're any physically different than we were back then.
I play with a head racket now, and I keep upgrading every year. I don't think it makes any difference, but it makes me feel more confident.
Yeah, yeah, like golf clubs. Yeah, I upgrade every 3 or 4 years, and it doesn't seem to help.
So, Marcus, how about yourself?
I think the first brand that comes to mind is probably Sprite. While a lot of brands were in my life, I never thought about them as brands, but Sprite was the first time I knew I was engaging with the brand. It was through that Obey Your Thirst work in my teenage years. The first time I felt like advertising was talking directly to me, and I was making a conscientious decision to purchase this branded product because of what it meant. I mean, that work was just I mean, even to this day, I see the spots. I mean, I teach the spots, but I see the spots and I get chills because it feels so of the time. And my identity was so unbelievably connected to it.
Sounds like emotional resonance, David, which we'll talk about later. Is that when you decided to go into marketing advertising? Was that the early seeds of it?
Oh, not at all. In those days, I wanted to be the fifth member of Boys to Men. I thought I was going to be a singer, but that was not in the cards for me. So I found another path that some way or another got me into the world of marketing. I'm very grateful for it.
Well, you did get sort of close to that, right? You worked with Beyonce years ago in digital strategy.
I sure did. And that was after a failed career as a songwriter, producer. So I went back to school to get my MBA and then came out after doing some work at Apple, working with Apple iTunes, then moving over to run digital strategy for Beyonce.
So what impact did that have, that experience with Beyonce, who, by the way, I think just manages her, I hate to say it, her brand, her personality so well. She's so fan-centric. I mean, she is just amazing. What about that experience influenced you?
Yeah, I would say it was probably one of the biggest failures of my career that actually provided the most insight that I use very much to this day. I learned in my time working with her is that you don't build community, you facilitate it. You find, to your point, not just fans, but people who subscribe to the same beliefs that guide you as a brand, as a person, as a human being. And when you operate at that fidelity, you move beyond what you do, the value propositions of your products, but to represent an ideology, a belief, a conviction that people subscribe to, and their consumption of your work, of your products, are not just because of their functional value, but because of their ideological congruence in consuming you and your wares and your dealings become ways by which they make their culture material, which is really powerful.
I'm so glad we have you two guys for the last episode, by the way. This is so fun.
Absolutely.
David, I wanted to talk about backgammon for a minute. We just talked about Beyonce. I purportedly you have played 30,000 games of backgammon. I'm not even sure how you know that.
Oh, I don't either, at least. And I play with a friend who um, beats me, 53% of the time, which is statistically significant. And the reason is he's a very ponderous lawyer, and I get impatient, so I make fast moves, and uh, and that's the difference. It's not because he's smarter or better than I am.
How has backgammon helped you be this brand strategy guru that you are?
I think it helps me kill time, and I think that you need something to get your mind off of everything, and whether it's biking or swimming or doing puzzles, I think that's really needs to be part of your life.
Totally agree. Well, listen, we could do this banter for the next hour, but we probably need to get into our topic for the day, which is brand-led leadership. And you both have a strong point of view in this space. So thanks again for joining us. And David, I want to start with you. You've published a new book. It's actually an update on your classic 2014 book, Aaker on Branding. And correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. I don't think I am. And the subtitle of this new edition is perfect: The Playbook to Building Strong Brands, which is the whole point of this series that we're doing. And you've talked about in this book sort of a new framework, the 5 Bs. So I'd like you to start by talking about these 5Bs, or pick one or two that you want to focus on. Then, Marcus, I'd like to get your reaction to what David shares about this framework for building strong brands in 2025.
Well, it starts with I got into brand equity in the late '80s when the concept emerged, and it emerged as a reaction to the short-termism of the P&G model that probably P&G had long drifted away from, but nobody else had. And scanner data influence, and more than anything else is BCG. BCG was used by half the companies in America, and they emphasize that it's all about market share. You just have to gain market share, and then the experience curve will give you a cost advantage, and you will win. And so everybody would try to buy market share. And I did some research that nobody saw that showed that if you buy market share, that in fact doesn't create profits or anything else. But anyway, so at the end of '80s, people kind of realized that the strategy of the day wasn't working. And so they turned to this emerging brand equity. And I wrote the first book there that defined it. And the whole essence of brand equity is brand is an asset, and it has long-term value. You do this short-term stuff spawned by BCG and scanner data and the rest, you're going to destroy brands, and they did destroy brands. So then gradually it took over marketing. Marketing became strategic, not tactical. It became sweet, not mid-management. And we have progressed on that for 30 some years. And now I see a regression. We got this demand marketing or performance marketing. You got to deliver now. You need leads. You need sales. And they gave it this great brand, demand marketing. And I saw some backslipping. And so I created the 5Bs to remind people that branding is more than awareness and image. In particular, it includes brand loyalty, which gets you into product development, gets you into customer journey, it gets you into segmentation, gets you into culture, one of Marcus's ideas, and 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 short-termism doesn't do that. And so that was one thing. The other thing I introduced, the fifth B, was brand portfolio, and people really have the illusion that it's just about a brand. It's never just about a brand. To have a strong brand, you need a co-brand, you need an endorser brand, you need a sub-brand, and you have what I call silver bullet brands. You have to have brands that branded energizers, branded differentiators, and branded source of credibility. And all that team has to get you. And then the core B is brand equity, which says that brand is an asset and all these things have to work together. And you can't have silos managing brand customer relationships, a silo managing the endorser brand, a silo representing awareness. And incidentally, it's no longer awareness for me, it's brand relevance, which is visibility and credibility in order to be considered. And so I sort of thought this structure is needed to tell the story about what branding is more than awareness and image, and that it's a long-term asset. And to be successful, you've got to engage all these elements.
Absolutely agree with David. We hear this constantly from our CMO clients. Short-termism versus the ability to invest in brand in good and bad times. And a lot of folks sort of lost their way. Performance marketing alone has done a disservice. And so the ability to balance short and long-term contribution, and David bringing the 5Bs to re-educate those who grew up with his philosophies, and even for new folks to understand and remind them of that importance.
But for our audience, the 5Bs are brand relevance, brand image, brand loyalty, brand portfolio, brand equity, which David referenced in that great soliloquy you just went through, David. I loved it.
Marcus, what do you think?
You know, when a minister preaches, the congregation says, "Amen." That's my response. Amen. I mean, everything David has mentioned is spot on. You know, there's to me, there's two things happening here. There's this, to your point, this idea of a fascination with regards to awareness, penetration, and imagery, right? Like we talk about brand, people typically think about logos, iconographies, the marks of ownership, because by its very nature, brands are marks, right? Like, if you translate the word brand into any Romantic or Germanic language, it translates into mark or marke or marca. So immediately when people think about brand, unfortunately, practitioners also, we tend to think about the marks. But it's so much more than that. At least when you want to realize its full potential requires so much more relevance. Relevance is this brand for me? And when it becomes for me, it's not about the value propositions and functionality of the product alone. It's about congruence with my identity and all the emotions that go into uh, constructing who I am in this socially phenomenal world in which I navigate. And then the other challenge there is moving beyond sort of the superficial nature of brand that by this point, I mean, we should know this, but unfortunately we don't. Maybe to your point, David, you said it very diplomatically. We have backslid into a regressed thinking of how we think of how our conception of brand. But the other parts of this short-termism, and perhaps this is the gift and the curse of marketers. We have this tendency to kind of react very quickly to new things, bright, shiny objects. We love it. Squirrel, we turn, look, we just can't help ourselves. And actually, I love that about our disciplines that we're so eager to try new things that sometimes our zeal becomes an obsession. And in that obsession, we swing so far to the other side of the pendulum that we forget things that we have learned. And considering all the technology we have at our disposal, our ability to count things, to see things, to look at behaviors in the here and now and measure its impact in the here and now, we tend to over prioritize the short term. Look at what's happening today. But brand is a long term horizon. We talk about loyalty, trust, equity. These things don't happen overnight, they're built over time. And if we don't have the right apparatus or apparati to measure in the long term, we regress to what's available to us, which is the short term. And in doing so, we end up eroding all the nuance, all the texture, all the equity that brands really provide us. And for our chances to improve, to optimize the brands that we steward on behalf of our clients, or if you are the client, or our partners, it requires us widening the aperture and perhaps going back to days of old, understanding what brand is at its foundational setting and how we can scaffold on top of it.
In the last couple of weeks, I've talked to the head of marketing at Apple and Nespresso. Right, Nespresso is an $8 billion brand, and they both talked about patience. Not being first or second, but doing it right, having something differentiated and distinctive, being on brand, role modeling brand-led leadership. Nespresso was founded in the 80s. They didn't come into the US until 2013, 14, because they wanted to get it right. And they wanted to be, and talk about premium pricing versus, it is, and same with Apple. And these are two companies, I think, that get the concepts that we're chatting about right now.
If nothing else, I do have one ad though that I should have mentioned, that I love that David hit on. I mean, not only did you write the book on brand equity, but you also ushered in the idea of brand architecture. And this idea of brand as a portfolio really is about how do we manage the equity of these different parts of the brand, be it the parent brand, the halo brand, its extensions, its partnerships, its sponsorships, and the alike. And to manage that, you have to, by its very nature, move beyond just an alignment of assets, just an alignment of logos or of imagery. This is more so about the meanings that these brands hold and how that meaning is transferred in the different contexts in which brand extensions begin to come to light.
Yeah, Jim, you mentioned differentiation. I find that it's not as obvious to others as you think. You go into somebody and say, "What does your brand stand for?" And they'll kind of tell you what they do. They'll give you their mission. We make cars that are safe. And if we're a business school, we're global, we're entrepreneurial, we're social, and about leadership. And then you step back and say, isn't that what all top business schools do? It's really important to put differentiation up there. And I've added a dimension that I think helps, and that's to be intriguing. you really have to be not only differentiated and of course in a relevant way, but you need to be intrigued. You need to so differentiate in an intriguing way, like the Haas Business School is confidence without attitude, and that's just intriguing. And so I think that when I have this model of brand vision model, you develop these brand pillars, 3 or 4 or 5 pillars, maybe more, and what we're looking for are ones that are differentiating and really intriguing and resonating.
So, Marcus, is the University of Michigan intriguing?
I'm gonna put you on the spot, David.
Marcus can defend the University of Michigan. Thank you very much. I'll stick to Berkeley.
Well played, well played. I think the idea is that the brand has a point of view in the world beyond its products, beyond what it does. And this point of view guides what it puts in the world, how it does it, with whom it does it, and becomes a North Star by which everything is governed, by which everything is shaped and molded. And at its core, this is sort of where Byron Sharp's work becomes really interesting. What we're talking about is not differentiation based on the classic positioning statements, like you should choose ours because of some value propositions relative to a category, but instead is they are distinctive because their separation isn't by what really is parity product value propositions, but instead by points of view. And if those points of view align to how you see the world, you go, that brand is for me. And now we get to brand relevance.
Well, if you ask the question, how do we be differentiated and intriguing, that'll take you in that direction.
Amen.
So, David, you mentioned earlier brand energizers as a concept in your book. Can you talk a little more about that and how it plays out in the real world?
Yeah, I think every brand needs energy and differentiation for that matter. But and every brand has almost no way of gaining it. If you make toothpaste or if you make bar soap, there's no way to get energy. So what you have to do is to attach yourself to something with energy, and that's how one of the reasons I got into purpose. I follow Jim Stengel wherever he goes, but
So you're the guy.
social purpose um, is a way to get energy. It's a way not only to help people, but it's a way to energize. And I love the story of Dove Real Beauty that took us $2.6 billion. Yeah, it's not Procter and Gamble, of course, but not everything is. Take a $2.6 billion business and turned it into a $6.5 billion business, all on the backs of a social program called Real Beauty, and then its little sister called Self Esteem Program, and uh, and so what I argue in my book, the Purpose Driven Branding book, is that the that you need social programs that help a business, because if you don't, it'll just be dead weight and it won't thrive. But if it can help a business, if it gives it an energy lift, if it gives it an image lift, it gives it an engagement lift, then it's part of the business, and it's no longer something that you have to decide if you're going to give money to this year. And then, of course, the big problem there is you don't want to be looked at somebody that is doing it just to help your business, which of course you are. And so the way you avoid that is you find something you're really passionate about. You find something you make a long-term commitment to. You find something that you're willing to be not only a knowledgeable about it, but be a thought leader in that area. And nobody accuses you of that anymore.
Marcus, branded energizers. You like what you heard?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's this point of view that brands have about the world that gives it permission to engage in the cultural discourse. If you sell toothpaste and that's the business you're in, and that's what the brand is based on, all you can talk about is toothpaste. Not a lot of energy there, not a lot of excitement there. But if you have a point of view on the world that transcends the category, whoa, that allows you entry and authority to have conversations about things that have nothing to do with what you do. Nike is a great example of this. Nike sells sneakers. It's a commodity, right? We haven't seen any massive innovation with regards to sneakers since the 80s and like the pump, the Reebok pump, like nothing extremely innovative in the category. Yet this brand, until recent times, have been able to be so unbelievably impactful in the economy because of its point of view. Every human body is an athlete, big, small, short, tall, we're all athletes. The only thing keeping us from realizing our best athletic self is us. That's why Nike tells the world to just do it. And when Nike enters the discourse, they're not talking about where they source their leather or how a shock absorbent their air, cushions are. Instead, it's a point of view of what it means to be an athlete. Unbelievably powerful and so much energy that ignites us to buy the sneakers, not because of what they are, but because of who we are.
Marcus, loved your book. It's been out for a little bit more for 2 years. For the culture, the power behind what we buy, what we do, and who we want to be. What's been the reaction to that now as we are 2 years later?
Well, I would say the reception has been uh, very, very welcoming. Much to my surprise, honestly, I feel so humbled by it, truly. And it's not like a LinkedIn humble brag thing. Like I truly, it's something that I've been talking about for like well over a decade, honestly. And I've been in boardrooms, on stages, sort of proselytizing, preaching this gospel, and it's been like, oh, that's interesting, but never really caught hold. And for the thinking to now have a home in people's minds and even in their organizations, I feel so unbelievably grateful. So the response has been for me, it's been overwhelming, and as far as how I feel, and in the marketplace of ideas, I feel like culture has a much more concrete contribution to the discourse. Instead of culture being this sort of abstract, ethereal idea, people can talk about it with some concreteness. We have a better Rosetta Stone by which we can talk about it. And for me, as a scholar, I don't know if you can be much more impactful. And as a practitioner, I feel like in some ways maybe I'm holding the door for better thinking to build on top of what I've established.
Interesting, Marcus. And why do you think it's had such resonance now?
Yeah, I think that, just like any idea, it's not just the merit of the idea alone. It has to find its right timing. Coming from the music industry, there's so many unbelievably talented artists that never really caught on because they were a little ahead of their time, right? And not just nothing about me. I think that the serendipity met me at a time where I was thinking about this idea, had the articulation that was digestible, I suppose, and the timing was like really spot on. That people were talking about culture, and someone probably said, "Wait, but what are we talking about again? What does this thing mean? What does it mean to get out in culture? What does it mean to move at the speed of culture? Just culture, 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 culture." So much a part of our vernacular, and I think along the ways, people just started to realize that we're talking about a thing that we innately know. We know it inherently in our guts, but we didn't really have the best language to describe it. And I think that my book just at the right time just had the right language for it. It just found itself. And for that, again, I'm just very, very, very grateful.
Earlier in the show, Ryan and I talked about brand leaders that we admire, and to be, and it's tough to be a brand led leader, right? I think Steve Jobs may have been the best of all time. Um, but I want you to reflect on 2 years out from the book. Do you think it's harder to be a brand led leader now than it was 2 years ago? And I'd like David to weigh in on that as well.
I don't think so. I think the same pressures are presenting themselves. The same challenges exist. They may, manifest in a different modality. Some would say the stakes are higher, and I don't know if that's the case. Maybe they're more visible, so that's a little bit more challenging. But at its core, I think that it's very much the same, and it requires what we've been saying. What's the point of view the brand has?
Mhm.
And as the leader, do you hold that point of view and live up to it when it's not convenient? Right? It's choosing to be convicted even when it's inconvenient. Unfortunately, we have all the points of view, all the purpose statements that in the world that we evangelize when it's convenient. But the moment that we hit some a rough spot, we go, "Ooh, I don't know. It's going to help shareholder value." So that was nice to have. We'll revisit that later on. But in the meantime, no, thank you. And as I think about the brilliance of Steve Jobs, which I totally agree is probably one of the best brand people we've ever had,
Mhm.
I see some of the contemporary leaders now. We talked about Dove and Unilever. AC Bracey is just she's just
Mhm.
unbelievably talented. And I also think about
The CMO at Unilever, ex-P&G, by the way, the current CMO of Unilever.
yeah, exactly. She's great. The global CMO at McDonald's, Morgan Flatley, the North American CMO at McDonald's who recently resigned, Tariq Hassan, unbelievable, and Corey Marchisotto at Elf, unbelievably talented. And these four people, and there are many more, of course. I mean, you look at the Forbes CMO list and you see them there, they're all there. But these four that come to mind at the moment, they are brand leaders. They don't just steward these marks of ownership that have all these cognitive and affective associations to them, but they believe in what the brand is trying to achieve, what it stands for, how it sees the world, and they lead accordingly. They influence accordingly. And I see not only the work and what they do inside the organization, but I see the impact it's having outside the organization in the marketplace. And you go like, this is the benchmark. This is the gold standard of what greatness looks like.
David, let's bring you into the conversation.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think brands are pretty much more powerful than ever, but brand building has changed a lot. But I do think it's takes a different set of skills now that it did in the past. Having said that, Steve Jobs would thrive today, I think, because one of the skills is innovation is more important. Disruptive innovation. I've done a lot of observing of categories and concluded that the only way to grow is with disruptive innovation. My brand's better than your brand just doesn't generate growth, and so that means that there's a premium on those people that are able to adjust an organization that's set up in terms of personnel and processing to run a business really well. It's not set up for innovation. To manage that and to also be able to take risks. I mean, the reason that Musk and Jobs are so good is because they were off the scale in terms of risk taking. Well, especially Musk, but they took these dramatic risks, and if you have 20 people taking risks, of the top 10% of those are going to be really really well. But anyway, innovation is more important ever. And actually, when I was observing books on innovation like Blue Ocean Strategy, they have a half a page on branding, half a page in the whole book. And Christensen has no pages in his books. And yet it's all about branding. You have to become the exemplar brand. You have to position the new innovation. You have to build barriers to competitors. You have to scale it. It's all branding. And so anyway, that's one thing. And the other thing is that the communication environment now is so hostile. There's not only media cover, there's amazing information overload. There is rampant skepticism. There's audiences now in control. It's um, it's just a nightmare. I mean, the old days that Marcus can remember. You Whedon and Kennedy, all that brilliant stuff is not going to work today. Well, maybe some of it will, because if you have real breakout communication, that still works. But it's a different environment, which means that you need to do more than ever. You have to think about using humor, using stories, using emotion, which is an indirect way of telling your message, and it makes it harder to tell your message. I mean, there's a litany, there's a whole graveyard full of brands that had brilliant execution that people can't remember what the brand was that was being advertised. But so you have to live in that world, make that work, and a whole set of ways to build your brand are coming up that we're kind of looked down on or put in the back burner or something. Things like sponsorships, things like events, that events that you tag onto or events that you create. Those things are now much more important than ever, and using those is not easy at all. So I think it's harder
I think the skill sets, to your point, required. New skill sets are required. But at its core, I think it really boils down to two things: know thyself and know thy people. If you know thyself, who you are, not what you do, how you see the world, then to your point, David, it's about going to preach the gospel. Now, the modality in which it's done has definitely changed, right? Definitely changed. Back in the day, you just put on television, print out of home, and you just kind of let it go in many ways, right? You kind of buy your way in, but now you can't. You have to earn your way in. So the stuff that you create doesn't require the media that you buy. It's about activating people who see the world similarly and go, oh yeah, I'm going to use that and share with my people. Again, not because I love your brand, but because I love me and my people. And it's an expression of who I am. Now you're leveraging the media people to propagate your message on your behalf, which requires new skills, no doubt. The other side of knowing thyself is knowing thy people, who we're going after. So to your point, it's much more hostile environment than ever before, for sure. Politically charged, ideologically charged, all the things. Even more of a reason why marketers have to say, I'm targeting these people, not them. And we know that's like marketing, like rule, number one, you can't target everybody. So you got to pick somebody. You got to say, this is my people. I'm going to segment the market based on some characteristics, and I'm going to target these people because these people are most likely to move. Well, when it comes to belief systems, ideologies, points of views that brands have, the people who are most likely to move are the people who see the world the way you do. And it requires having the courage to say, well, it's not for you. Like, if you don't like it, okay, it's not for you. And I think to the point we've been saying, Steve Jobs, he would be the first person to say that today. Remember when the iPhone, they changed the casing for it and people were like holding it and it was dropping the call. They call it the drop gate or whatever they called it. And his response was, you're doing it wrong. You're going to love Steve for that. I mean, today he'd say, if people were complaining about his advertising, about his marketing, about his brands, he'd be like, cool, it's not for you. Thank you.
This concept of brand as asset, which we talked about in the first episode of the show, we had the former CMO of AB InBev on the show. He's written a lot of books about financial asset, brand as financial asset. Could you both talk a little bit about what you've learned, observed about how to inculcate that thinking into a company culture? Because I've talked to so many CMOs who tell me their CEOs, they don't believe in what they do. They don't really believe in brand.
I get that a lot. We're in this demand marketing situation. How do I explain to people? But at the end of the day, the way that you demonstrate value to the brand is you just ask the simple question. Okay, what is your strategy going forward, and what brand strength do you need to enable that strategy? That's the question. And when I wrote that first book, I put in about 15 ways brand equity can help business. And some of these are not obvious. Like you take visibility, for example. Just the fact that it's visible gives it some credibility because people say, I don't know what the hell this brand does, but I've heard about it. Now, if I heard about it, it's probably has some success in the marketplace. There's a study done on branded features, and people showed in a laboratory experiment, if you brand a feature, people pay more money for it, even though they had no idea what the feature was. So that's 1 out of 15 ways brand equity can help. If you give them this list and say, pick out 4 or 5 that are really important in your world and use them to help people try to understand why they need brands and what kind of brand strength they need to make their business strategy work.
To me, this is where the scholarship becomes unbelievably valuable. Unfortunately, over the years, marketing has become advertising and brands have become logos and marks, unfortunately. So when people say, I mean, I hear this in the agency world all the time. They go, "Oh, that brand doesn't do any advertising." I go, "Well, what do you mean?" They don't do any ads, but rather they say don't do any marketing. And what they really mean to say is the brand doesn't do any advertising. They use this sort of interchangeable thing that marketing is advertising. It's not the case. If we go back to the literature, right? Marketing is going to market, right? Going to the people. I talk about this in For the Culture. Marketing is going to market, going to the people. And with what do we go to market? A product. Do we get that product away for free? No, there's usually some exchange, an exchange rate that we call price. And we get it to people through some pipeline that Jerome McCarthy called place. And then we communicate it through promotions, the 4 Ps: product, price, place, promotion. I know it seems so like rudimentary. It seems so, sort of surface level. But when we start thinking about marketing as that way, marketing is going to market, we go, okay, well, why do we go to market? What's the point of this? To get people to move, get people to adopt behavior. If you're the CFO, you go, great, people adopt behavior. That means money. If you're the CEO, you go, great. If people adopt behavior, that means money for us, which drives the stock market. Great. If marketing's job is to get people to adopt behavior, then it really puts more value in the seat that marketing holds in the C-suite. And this, for me, is why culture is so unbelievably important to this equation. That there's no external force more influential to human behavior than culture, full stop. And if culture drives behavior, this is why marketing in the cultural frame is so compelling. And one would say that you cannot with 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 any intellectual sort of honesty talk about brand without talking about culture, because brands are vessels of meaning. And it's through our cultural lenses that we translate the world and give things meaning. That's why for some, a cow is leather, for others, a deity, and for some, it's dinner. Which one is it? It's all those things, depending on who you are. And that's how brands operate also. These vessels of meaning that come with so much cognitive and affective value, the equity in which they hold. Right. So if you communicate marketing as that, we go to market to get people to move. And getting people to move drives the business forward. I don't see how anyone in the C-suite goes, I don't know what that is, or what's the real value in that?
All right. We got to wrap this beautiful conversation up, but I want to end with one question. And this is the final episode of the Brand Builders Playbook, episode 8. People who have listened or watched this for 8 episodes are putting together their own playbook for themselves for building up a stronger brand and being a brand-led leader. What's one thing you'd like to share with them in terms of a tip to get started, to become a better, more effective brand-led leader, something to put into their own personal playbook?
For me, I would say that as we've been circling in this conversation, is that the most powerful brands, they transcend the category in which they operate. They move beyond the value propositions and operate at an ideological level, a belief system that goes beyond the category in which they operate. So the question, you have to ask yourself is, what do I believe? And I know Simon Sinek brought forward the thinking of having a why, and I like that. I like it a lot, like the spirit of that. But it's not just words that we use. Can't just be communications. You have to like believe it religiously. Like I really, really, really believe this. We talked about Steve Jobs. We talked about Elon Musk. These guys really, really believed. Lauryn Hill said it best. How you going to win if you ain't right within? You got to know what you believe. And having a very clear belief system, that becomes the thing that not only operates how you behave, the people that you hire, it inspires people and gets to David's earlier point about innovation. The challenge with innovation is that we often mistake innovation for invention. Inventions are new things. Innovation is new things that people value. How do I know what people value? It requires understanding who they are and being relevant for them. But you can't do that if you don't know who you are.
David, your turn to say amen.
Amen. Yeah. Let me just, I have 2 things. Let me extend what Marcus said, and that is that I really encourage people to start out by figuring out what are your brand pillars, and the label for each of those pillars is so important. The consulting company I'm associated with, we'd spend 5 weeks with 5 people trying to get just the right labels, because if you get the right label, and it can become a tagline or something. It's so magic. It's just because it will do with the kinds of things Marcus is talking about. It's got to inspire. It's got to be intrigued. You got to be proud of it. It's got to be something you want to talk about, and it has to be differentiated. It just has to be different. If you're a business school and you need to how you're innovation oriented, you got to take your tack on innovation. It can't be just innovation. And the second thing I would think is more maybe a little more tactical, but the lowest hanging fruit I've ever seen is you go into a business and you say, "What's your secret sauce? What are you really proud of here?" And they can give you a 3-minute, brilliant, articulate passionate description of what that secret sauce is. And then you stop and you pause for a moment, just let silence carry the day and say, why don't you brand that? And they think and they say, well, I can't brand that. That's just a way we treat people. And I rattle off the 3 or 4 companies that have branded just that. And they have a way of treating people, the HP way or something, and they branded it. You can brand that. Lowest hanging fruit, as I say, you find something that's important to you, that's differentiating, that's resonating, brand it. And if it's lying around with a brand, but it's not activated, activate that brand.
Guys, what a conversation. I mean, I just, we should take a vacation together.
You named the place, Jim. We're there.
This was I just feel like we're scratching the surface, honestly.
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff.
Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your wit, your intelligence. This has just been so good, so helpful, so useful, and so fun. And I'd love to get this gang together in person somehow, some way. I think that'd be a riot.
Yes, please. I've been looking forward to this all day. So you all did not disappoint.
Thank you both for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, Ryan, we knew this would be a good one. That was a really good one. What fun. We could have gone on for another hour. We've had chatter about maybe we should do a special series with those two, maybe bring in Kate. So what did you make of all that? I mean, what did you pull out as a couple key lessons, key pieces of learning?
I think the first one is that great brands don't just sell, they lead. And I loved how David talked sort of about the evolution of brand building and how today we've had a relapse. We sort of got into short-termism. It's all about today and clicks and last click attribution and getting people to buy right now. And talking about the importance of, or the importance of, long-term relationships, even though you can quantify short and long-term a brand. I also very much enjoyed the importance of culture. As folks talk about measuring relevance and meaningfulness, something we do at Barra, how do you tap into that? And the ability to navigate so many cultural headwinds and tailwinds. I thought it was fascinating to hear Marcus as an expert on culture, on the ways that brand builders can embrace that. And you have to be agile.
Anything you disagreed with in that dialogue, Ryan?
I think the long-term only piece, as I probably mentioned in the beginning, Jim, brand absolutely has a short and long-term contribution, and we can measure it today. And depending on your stakeholders, if you're the CMO, some companies need the short-term sales over the long term. And if folks think, well, if it's just about short-term, brand could take a back seat, absolutely wrong. You would be throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Now, we've also had this tradition of sharing one thing that the audience should consider putting in their playbook. And it was always fun to have Kate and Lindsay join us for that, but it's just you and me today. So Ryan, I'll follow you on this one. What's one thing from this amazing episode that you would recommend people consider putting in their playbook?
Well, as you see, two folks who've published a lot, both Marcus and David, a lot of the fundamentals remain true today, but we have to evolve. And I love that we have folks that have academic backgrounds rooted in a lot of research. So the ability to continue to measure and manage and maximize your brand to navigate the waters.
Yeah, I think for me, it was just this whole notion of leadership. I mean, that's what we talked about when we opened the show. The thing I would put in the playbook for the audience is, what are you role modeling? What questions do you ask? What do you show that you value? Are you leading first with your brand in mind, whether or not you're doing something short-term and tactical or something more long-term? So this one's very much about, think about how you spend your time, what people are taking away from you as a leader, because you are being watched. And when you're middle to upper in an organization, people watch everything you do. And how are you showing up as a leader? And what are you role modeling? I think that's what I would think about putting in your playbook. So Ryan, that's it for the series, the Brand Builders Playbook. After all this time of thinking about it, we did it. Thanks to the audience for joining us. We really do hope this has been helpful. We spent a lot of time thinking about what is the modern playbook and what are the topics that we should explore. And I just want to thank you, Ryan, for partnering on this, and your team, which which are so talented. This wouldn't have been possible without your team. And I think this show, it's right for this time. It's the right time with the right topics for the marketing people out there who are doing their best to put things into the world that move their business and inspire their organization. So it's been a real pleasure. I hope it's been useful. And Ryan, I'll turn it over to you for the last word.
Yeah, Jim, absolutely. I love our friendship and our partnership, so really appreciate it. Looking forward to doing this again. I want to thank our viewers and our listeners. I think I've certainly learned a lot and the ability to have agile skills. So I think that there's a lot of practical lessons that folks, whether they're new or seasoned, can use to continue to put brand first. So thank you.
We also hope you found that the worksheets that we put out with each episode helpful. We thought, podcasts and YouTube shows are great, but what do you have to take back to your team? So we hope the worksheet that we created helps you talk to your team about the learning in each episode and what you can apply to your brand and your business.
Absolutely, Jim. And folks, thank you already for the folks who've already given comments on each episode. Feel free to do so. And if there's any interest for future episodes or future topics or challenges that you have as a brand builder, please, we welcome the dialogue. But thank you again.
All right, on to season 2.
Let's do it.